All right, good morning and welcome to the 2024 Information Resources Deployment Review, or IRDR webinar. My name is Mark Leavenworth. I'm the IRM Education and Outreach Coordinator here at DIR. I'm just going to run through a couple of housekeeping items before we start the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and is going to be available on the DIR YouTube channel. It takes us a couple days to process that, but we'll get it up as quickly as possible. Questions, we're urging you guys to put the questions through the Q&A pane, and we plan to address those after the presentation. The chat is enabled, but it's one-way communication, so you can see things from us. And we will send a follow-up email after the webinar with a copy of the slides from the presentation and an event evaluation. And as always, we love to hear your feedback. It helps us improve our events. I'm going to turn things over to John Hoffman, who is the Deputy State of Texas Chief Information Officer and DIR's Chief Technology Officer. John?
Good morning. Thank you, Mark. Thank you all so much for joining this 2024 IRDR webinar. The IRDR information is really fundamental for so many different reports and insights that are leveraged by entities across the state in shaping the technology direction and appropriations for all of Texas public sector. The team has worked really hard to put together an efficient and effective IRDR process. I hope that you'll see that today as we walk through the different components of it. And I look forward to getting your feedback. We're going to continue different outreaches through this process. And if there are things that you see that we could provide more clarity to or answer any questions, by all means, please engage us. Today, we have quite a few different presenters that are going to go through the different sections, but we also have some additional resources that are available. And I'd like to take just a moment to have the additional resources kind of call themselves out and make sure that everybody knows who all is involved in the IRDR support. So, Marissa, would you like to start?
Hi, everyone. My name is Marisa Moore, and I'm a cybersecurity analyst on DIR's Governance, Risk, and Compliance team. One responsibility of mine is that of the Archer lead, which means I manage the GRC mailbox that all of you will be corresponding with at one time or the other. And that is for all Spectrum account administration and support.
Great. Amy?
Good morning. My name is Amy Woosler, and I am a contractor for DIR on the Spectrum side. I may have interacted with many of you previously on account questions or on any of the application questions, and I'm happy to be here today.
Wonderful. Well, Robert?
Good morning, everyone. Robert Benajam, part of the Strategic Digital Services team. We had a name change. That's why it's difficult to come out sometimes. But I'm here to help. Any questions I can help answer, by all means, please engage. Thank you.
That's great. All right. Anyone else want to introduce now? Okay. Well, thank you all again for joining. Again, I hope this webinar is very beneficial for you all. Elizabeth, would you like to kick off by walking through the cycle?
You bet. I'm Elizabeth Cooper. I'm the Director of Planning, Policy, and Reporting here at DIR. And we're pleased to talk to you about the IRDR. And we really wanted to start off with how it fits in to the overall planning, reporting, and funding cycle. And so many of you may have seen this, this graphic before. But I think it really depicts that the IRDR is part of a bigger process of planning, assessing, reporting, requesting, and hopefully receiving IT funding that you need to accomplish your agency's mission. In December, we held a webinar that covered this process, and we actually recorded it. And so I'll throw that in the chat because I'm going to go through this rather quickly. But if you want to hear more details about each phase of the planning cycle, you can watch that recorded webinar. So we really start off in the odd numbered years setting these statewide goals through the state strategic planning process for information resources management. And so these are broad, high-level goals that agencies should be able to use to frame kind of the way they think about IT in the future for planning purposes. Then in the even-numbered years, we start in with assessing through the Information Resources Deployment Review, and we'll dive into that a little deeper, but we kind of go back to the strategic plan, look at how we're making progress on those goals, as well as a lot of other questions and inventories that can help you plan for your legislative appropriations requests down the line. Part of the IRDR includes some compliance questions. And so in the even-numbered years, we ask agencies to develop any corrective action plans that might be needed. Agencies will be working on their own strategic plans and security plans, and going through that IRDR review process can help you prepare for those as well. The IRDR also ties into the assessments, the APM assessments that are required for agencies that participate in the prioritization of cybersecurity and legacy systems, or PCLS, that can be a good tool for calling attention to projects in the legislative appropriations request. And then finally, at the end of the even-numbered years, DIR uses a lot of the information from the IRDR to develop biennial performance reports. There's a main report that includes some legislative recommendations. We use that IRDR data to support any of those recommendations. Then we get back into the odd numbered years with the legislative sessions. But today, we're really here to take a deeper dive into the IRDR. And so, Tessa, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Thanks, Elizabeth. Hello, everybody. My name is Tessa Lopez. I am a senior policy analyst here with DIR. I work alongside Elizabeth Cooper in the planning, reporting, and governance office. We work very hard together managing the IRDR process. So thanks for joining us today. I just wanted to give you a little more insight into the background of the IRDR, what it is, why we do it. As Elizabeth mentioned, in the even-numbered years, the IRM of each state agency and institution of higher education is required to conduct an IRDR. And the IRDR really assesses how effectively an agency's information resources support its mission goals and objectives. And it also demonstrates how an agency's IT deployment aligns with the state's technology direction and compliance with those technology-related statutes, rules, and standards. What you're really seeing here on this slide is just the various components of the IRDR process. The survey includes questions related to the agency's IT environment, progress towards those state strategic goals, and compliance. There is also a section of the survey that requires state agencies to report on those devices and business applications that you use. Many of the questions are pre-filled with the responses from past IRDR submissions and data from other sources like the inventory from the STS portal. Elizabeth also mentioned this. A lot of the data that is collected through the IRDR helps DIR enhance the quality of services and solutions that we provide to our customers. It helps us identify compliance issues that need to be addressed. And we also use a lot of this data in several legislative reports. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we've had a lot going on since we released the instructions in December and opened up that Spectrum portal for data entry last month. This month, we've really been focusing on outreach to various groups just to bring awareness of the IRDR process. Next month, every Thursday in March, we will be hosting hour-long drop-in meetings. And anyone that has, any questions about the IRDR can jump on the meeting at any time within that hour to get assistance from us in answering those questions. March 31st is the deadline to submit all those IRDR responses for both state agencies and institutions of higher education. And, for state agencies that have any items of non-compliance, the deadline to get those corrective action plans in is May 31st. Next slide, please. So let's go ahead and walk through some of the different sections of the IRDR. Next slide, please. Part 1 is really focused on the agency IT environment. Again, there's many questions that are pre-populated with previous responses, and any new questions to the survey, those are labeled as such in the instructions. I do want to point out that section 1.03 is required for institutions of higher education as it is part of the digital accessibility survey. Next slide, please.
And I can cover the compliance part of the IRDR. This section asks several questions, and basically they tie back to the statute or to the Texas Administrative Code, and they ask whether or not your agency is compliant with those certain standards. There's a security section, statewide websites, EIR accessibility, and we have Marie Cohan on the call as a resource for that. There's questions about compliance with geographic information system standards and electronic records management and additional standards. Institutions of higher education must complete sections 2.02 and 2.03 regarding state websites and EIR accessibility. State agencies, when you report that your agency is not fully compliant, you have the opportunity, and it's required, to complete a corrective action plan. And I'll tell you a little bit more about those now. So the information resources corrective action plans really are just a plan that tells you and your staff and your agency what we're going to do to move toward full compliance, and it outlines the steps that you will take. You're not required to complete all the actions in the plan by May 31st. What you're required to do is to have the plan. And so these IR caps, once you submit your information resources deployment review, are ready to launch as soon as you submit it, or a day after. And for each instance of non-compliance, there needs to be a plan. Next slide, please.
So part 3 is related to the alignment of, sorry about that, just wanted to get my camera on here so you can see me. Part 3 of the IRDR is related to the alignment of those state technology goals, alignment with the current goals and progress towards the previous ones. The state strategic plan was updated this past November, and you can click on the link at the slide, at the bottom of the slide here, to take a closer look at those current goals and objectives. And we can also place a link to the state strategic plan within the chat. Next slide, please. You're muted, Elizabeth.
I am muted. So part 4 is the IT inventory, and there are a few statutory requirements that are the basis for conducting this inventory. We divide the inventory into 2 categories. One is for devices and other IT assets, and the other is for applications, including business applications. Just a quick reminder that the information in the inventory, much of it is very sensitive and much of it is confidential. We do comply with the Public Information Act for all public information requests, but we just want you to know that we treat all of this data as confidential. And so we seek those opinions from the AG's office if there is a request. And also a friendly reminder to y'all, when you're communicating with us about your inventory in particular, be sure and recognize that it's sensitive data and we don't want to include too many details in an email. Next slide, please. So the inventory components, like I said, are divided up into devices and other IT assets and business applications. For both inventories, we ask that you review and update the inventory. And what that means is add new ones. If the status of an inventory item has changed, change it if it's no longer active, or if there's a duplicate that you need to identify. So that's the review and update of the inventories. The devices and other IT assets inventories includes reporting on things like servers, mainframes, other IT equipment. We pre-populate many of the fields from past IRDRs. And also if you're an SDS customer in the data center, information that you update in ServiceNow will transfer over to Spectrum on a daily basis. For the business applications, again, you're going to review and update them. This is also an opportunity to generate a new APM assessment that could be needed for the PCLS. If your assessment is dated before 2020 and you plan to include that in your PCLS, be sure and do one of those assessments. They can be done at any time, but IRDR is a good time to do it. One other thing that I wanted to mention about the applications is there's a new field where you can check mark whether or not you consider it a legacy system. This will help you be able to quickly have an inventory of what your agency is considering a legacy system. And also it will help DIR target resources and services to you to help you modernize. Both inventories require that you attest that it is complete before you submit it. And I mentioned the sources that we used already. The inventory uses that we can use them for required legislative reports, but also you can use them internally and get ready for the PCLS if you participate in that. Next slide, please. And so submitting the IRDR is the last step. You need to make sure that each part displays a green check mark that tells you that that section is complete. There will be pop-up boxes that try to help you identify questions that may be incomplete if you're having trouble submitting. Those attestation boxes must be checked after you finish the inventory part. And then you actually physically go in and change the status from in progress to submitted. And that is the last step of the IRDR. Now, we also know that many of you have questions when you're navigating through Spectrum. I did want to mention that we do have a user's guide, and I'll throw that in the chat, and also Tessa will mention it again during resources. But right now, we want to take a good bit of time and have Amy from Archer do a demonstration of Spectrum and give y'all the opportunity to answer questions.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So if we go ahead and move to the next slide, there are a couple of notes before we jump into the demo. So just making sure that we review the Spectrum user guide to know any of the new questions, as Elizabeth mentioned. In terms of a browser, Chrome and Edge work the best, but they're not required. But if you are experiencing any issues, those would be the options to try. Another note is to not use the built-in navigation of your browser. Please utilize all navigation within Spectrum itself, whether that be a X in the top right corner or clicking on the navigation menu on the left-hand side. We do have the option to open support requests within Spectrum, which will give the quickest response to any access questions or any issues with the questions inside of IRDR. And we'll go over what that looks like here in just a second in the demo. If you do not see a user within the delegated to box or the reviewer box, most likely that user does not have a Spectrum account. And once again, a support request can be opened for that. If there are any other questions, miscellaneous, those can be directed to the GRC mailbox for password resets or any other TDIS issues. So on that note, we'll go ahead and move into the Spectrum demo. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So currently I'm logged in as an agency IRM, which means I have the Information Resources Manager home dashboard, which allows me some different links to access the IRDR records, the IRCAP records. However, if you do not have the IRM dashboard due to just having other access roles and other dashboards, or you're not an IRM trying to complete the IRDR, you can access it on the left-hand side under IRDR/IRCAP. You can access it by clicking on this link here. This will give you more detailed IRDR dashboards. You can also access the IRDR records by clicking into dashboards. This will take you to specifically IRDR again, so a second way of getting there. And lastly, by going to IRDR down here, and you can view all of your previous year's IRDRs. So we'll go back up to the top to review the different dashboard types. So we have our IRDR progress here in the top left corner, some general instructions and general information on this side. And then we have some further dashboards down here for analysis and a quick overview of the IRDR records, as well as your devices and applications. So let's go ahead and go into the IRDR records themselves. If you are looking to export previous year's responses to aid in responding to the 2024 IRDR questionnaire, you can click on the questionnaire ID. And then in the top right corner, there's an export button, and you have a couple of different formats that you can export to. Excel, the CSV, or the PDF are probably the recommended options for exporting those responses. So now we'll go into the 2024 IRDR questionnaire. Starting at the top, we have some general instructions for 2024. Moving to the general information section, you should have an IRM listed in this box here. The IRM can then place users in the delegated to box. This will then give them access to edit the IRDR questionnaire. All users should be able to view the IRDR questionnaire. However, to actually edit the IRDR questionnaire, users will need to be in the delegated to box, in the reviewer box, or in the IRM or ISO group. If a user is not displayed in this section, please complete a support request and we'll get them added so that they can be placed in the delegated to field. The next section here, the part 1 through 4 progress indicators. For IHEs, you won't necessarily see the part 3 and part 4 check marks. They will say not applicable. For further section progress indicators, you can click in detailed section progress and find which questions have not been answered. On the submission section down here, we can place a reviewer. Once a reviewer is placed in there, they will need to review the questionnaire and mark it as complete before the submission status box will actually change over to be able to be submitted. So before we get to the submission status of completed, let's go through the sections here. Some general notes are we have sticky marks on the right side of each question. By clicking on the sticky note, you can add any comment to the questions. Once that comment has been saved, the sticky note will turn to a dark orange color, and you can view those comments at the bottom of the questionnaire as well in a summarized format. Another item to note is that Section 1 responses have been pre-populated with previous year's responses, unless it was a new question and they were not able to be mapped. Some of the questions are dependent on other question responses. For example, 1.03.01, if you select yes, there are some questions that will not show. If you select no, there are questions that will appear to be answered further. Once you select a question, please select save, or once you complete a section, please select save and save often, as there is not an autosave functionality and there are quite a few questions here. So please save as often as possible. So that is all of the notes for part 1. So now we'll go into part 2 through 4. Part 2 is very similar to part 1, where you will select the answer choice that makes the most sense for your agency. And once again, please make sure to save often. Part 3 is very similar to previous years as well, with some different answer choices, some different questions. So please make sure to review all questions, even if they were pre-populated from previous years. Now we'll go to the IT inventory section. As Elizabeth stated, the device information should be coming over from ServiceNow on a daily basis, but please review all devices before attesting in the devices inventory attestation section. You can add a new device record by clicking the link here. You can also display all of your devices by clicking Display Report. Once the report appears, you should see all of your devices, and you can edit them by clicking on any of the boxes that have this pencil mark at the top of the column. For example, we can change this to a different year. And then once any updates are made, please scroll over to the right side and select the floppy disk or the Save Changes at the top. Once you save, those options should disappear and you'll know you have saved at that point. You can also add a new device by clicking the ellipses in the top right corner and selecting New Record. Once you click New Record, please complete all of the required fields, which are marked with a red asterisk. Once you are done adding your devices, you can also export the information by clicking in the top right corner, the same export feature that was used to export previous year's IRDR questionnaires, and select one of the formats here. So now we'll go to the application inventory section, which should function very similarly to the devices section. So we have general instructions. We can add a new application by clicking the link here. We can view all applications by clicking Display Report. The difference with application is we have a couple of fields here that we need to pay close attention to. We have the legacy system field, which is new and it is required to be completed. We also have these APM fields here, which are necessary if you are going to be completing an APM assessment. To generate a new APM assessment, in this far right column, we'll click the dropdown and select yes. The APMs will be generated once the IRDR for the current year is completed. And like Elizabeth said, these are required, the APMs are required if you have not completed one in the past 4 years for PCLS. And applications can also be exported by clicking in the top right corner and selecting one of the formats here. So once we've reviewed the applications and devices, we'll go ahead and confirm by checking the boxes in each of the attestation sections. And then we'll save. Now, if we scroll to the top, we can see all the progress indicators have a green check mark, and my submission status box is now able to have other options be selected. I can change this to submitted. The submit date should populate. I'll go ahead and click save. If there's a reviewer, it will go to the reviewer first before the submission status can be changed to submitted. Now that we've completed the 2024 IRDR questionnaire, we can take a look at the IRCAP records. As stated previously, the IRCAP records may take a day or so to be generated. Those IRCAP records can be accessed in a couple of different ways as well. They can be accessed via the IRDR dashboard by clicking IRCAP-records. There's also an IRCAP dashboard. Within the IRCAP dashboard, we have more specific instructions. We also can view any open remediation plans, overdue remediation plans. This gives more information that is clickable. So if we click into one of these metrics, we can have a listing here of those remediation plans. So now we'll take a look at one that is not started. So this would be the status of the remediation plans after you submit your IRDR, and they're generated automatically. In the remediation plan, please complete all fields that are marked with a red asterisk, as well as any other fields that need to have information added to them. Once this information is provided, you can click the drop down in the actions button at the top and click submit plan. Once you submit the plan, there will be some different fields that are required. The remediation plan will look like this, and you'll have actual start date, actual completion, and actual costs that need to be filled in, as well as steps to compliance. As Elizabeth stated previously, the statutory requirement is that the remediation plans or the IRCAPs are submitted by May 31st, but they do not have to be completed by May 31st. Once they are submitted and you have completed the fields, you can select in compliance in the advanced workflow actions button at the top. So that concludes the IRCAP section. So let's take a look at the support request option now. If there are any issues with records being locked, fields being locked, access issues, at the top of the page, there's a support request link here. If you select the support request link and you provide all of the required information and click save and close, someone on the GRC team will respond to the ticket with further questions or that it has been completed to provide any users additional access. One final note, if you did submit your IRDR but are still looking to make updates to it or there are any issues with it, you will need to contact DIR at the IRDR email or the GRC email to have it unlocked by us, so that way you can continue editing. So I believe that concludes our demo of the 2024 IRDR IRCAP process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was really helpful. Every time I see the demonstration, I learn a little more. I do know we have some questions in the chat. And if you have additional questions, please throw them in the actually the Q&A panel, not the chat. And Mark, do you want to walk us through some of the questions that are already there?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Okay, so the first question was, how long after certification of the IRDR by agency IRM do the IRCAPs get released to the agency?
Amy, do you want to confirm? I said earlier that they launch a day after. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yep, so they should be automatically generated within a day or so. There are feeds that run and generate those, so they should be accessible within the next day.
Great. Are IHE or institutions of higher education supposed to answer all questions in 2.02 or just the one accessibility question in 2.02.01?
For the progress indicators to switch over to the green check marks, all questions within section 2.02 and 2.03 will need to be completed.
And I'll just elaborate on that a little more because that came up during the ERAC coffee chat the other day. I went back and looked at the TAC, and the Texas Administrative Code 213 requires DIR to conduct an accessibility survey regarding progress and compliance with Chapter 206 and Chapter 213. So the TAC doesn't get down to that section level and saying just the accessibility questions. It says a survey on Chapter 206. And so we've provided instructions for the spectrum to operate so that those questions must be answered.
Great. Okay. If we mark items as duplicate, do they continue to show up on future IRDR inventories? This is in reference to the inventory section.
If there are devices or applications marked as duplicate, as long as they are active, they will continue to show up on the IT inventory. And Robert, you can maybe expand on that a little bit more about how that works on the ServiceNow side and keeping the systems up to date.
Yes, if you have a situation where it's duplicate and it does have a ServiceNow flag, I recommend that you reach out to the ServiceNow team and have them correct any issues.
Got it. Thank you, Robert. What should I do if the devices do not display or are not there? I think this is again in reference to the inventory section.
Yeah, on the devices inventory, the CMDB feed is new this year. So if there are no devices showing, you also have the option of creating a new device record to make sure that that's displaying accurately within Spectrum. And that can be done by clicking the link within the devices attestation section, or that can be done via the IRM dashboard. There are a couple different ways that a new device can be added.
And Amy, we've received a few questions about the inventory where people have said, I can't see it, or I can't see all of the columns. And it turned out they didn't have the appropriate access for the inventory. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, so to edit and view the devices, users will need to be in the IRM group. To view the IRDR, just need to be in the general user group. But to edit the IRDR, you will need to be in the delegated to field, reviewer field, or the IRM group. And then to edit the applications, we'll need to be in the IRM group. But to view applications, only need to be in the general user group. So that is a little bit complicated. So if you're having any access issues, please complete a support request or reach out to the GRC mailbox. But if you are having trouble with the devices or applications specifically, it may be needing the IRM or the information security officer role added to your account.
Great. Okay, I know this one we've touched on previously, but it might be good to reiterate. How do IRDR requirements differ between agencies and IHEs?
So I'll take this one, and then if Marie wants to add anything, I'll turn it over to her. But institutions of higher education are required to conduct an IRDR, but not report it to DIR. What they are required to report to DIR is the answers to the digital accessibility survey. And so we have incorporated that into the IRDR, and that's why there are specific questions that are highlighted that say IHEs are required to complete that because they're part of this EIR accessibility survey. Marie, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think that pretty well covers it. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Great, thanks.
Will the APM assessment questions ever change?
That's a good question. I know that our CTO shop, our Chief Technology Office, has had a lot of discussions about the APM questions this year. Robert, do you have any insight into whether those questions change over time?
They do change, and I would toss it over to John to let us know if anything will be changing for this year or has changed.
Yeah, I mean, we always work with the APM assessment questions, as with all of them, to keep them current and relevant. Certainly, as we're introducing new technologies, we'd want to capture those in the future. There may be some questions eventually on legacy technologies that are no longer relevant. A lot of that is driven by the information that we get each cycle to really kind of see at what point do we pull some of the old ones and create some new ones.
Right. All right. How is the new legacy flag defined in our application inventory?
Robert or John, do you want to take that question on the definition? I know we have a definition in Spectrum, and I believe there's also one in the instructions, but
yeah, Robert, you got this, or you want me to go?
I can look up the definition that we have.
Yeah. So just generally, legacy is defined in statute. Forgive me for not the quoting it exactly, but it essentially is if any part of the system has antiquated or components which are no longer being serviced, and so from that we work to more clearly define specifics around certain components. End of life, I know, is one thing if there's a known end of life component to it. Others may just be a question on the technology itself, not a specific brand or application. So I think we can certainly put that in either the postings or whatever else, but there is a definition we've got for legacy. If that was the question. I noticed it was around the legacy flag being identified. I just didn't know for sure if that answered the question or not. If it doesn't, if you're curious about how the flag works or whatever, let us know. We'll get another question in.
Great, thank you, John. Okay, is Spectrum an acronym? What does it stand?
Real quick, sorry, Mark. I just posted it in the chat, the
Oh,
definition
good.
that
Thank
we're
you.
looking at.
Yeah, thank you, Robert.
Spectrum stands for Statewide Portal for Enterprise Cybersecurity Threat, Risk, and Incident Management. So it is also used for reporting security incidents. Can you repeat the sections IHE are required to complete? Specifically 2.06. We're looking for just to go through a listing of exactly which questions IHEs are required to complete.
so IHEs are required to submit, and this is in the instructions too. I just threw it in the chat because we kind of flag in big bold letters, IHEs need to complete this, but it's sections 1.03, 2.02, and 2.03. All questions in each of those three sections need to be completed.
Excellent. Is there a soft copy available of the APM questions?
There is, and we can provide that and put it in the IRDR website so you can have access to it.
All right, and then this kind of overlaps with that last question we had, Elizabeth. If I'm a state agency digital accessibility contact, do I only need to complete the section 1.03 accessibility section?
So IRMs are required to submit the IRDR, and the ERACs can support them by answering the digital accessibility questions. Tiffany, I'm not sure if you're from an IHE or an agency, because I can't see that, but
She's with ERS.
okay, and so you do need to complete section 1.03, but also section 2.02 and 2.03 to meet the EIR accessibility survey requirements.
One more came in. Will a completed IRDR ever get kicked back to the agency?
I'm not sure what is meant by kicked back. IRDRs can be viewed, so you can see your completed IRDR. If you're asking, will we reject it? No, we will not reject it. If you haven't completed it all or submitted it by the deadline, we look at those a few days before the deadline of March 31st, and we do outreach because we want everybody to complete the IRDR that is required to complete it. And also, this is a good time to mention that March 31st falls on a Sunday this year, and it is a statutory due date. So that last week before the due date, we'll definitely have the Thursday office hours, but we'll also make an effort to make ourselves available to y'all because we do know that March 31st is a Sunday and we can't extend the deadline.
And Elizabeth, I'll just add on again. I wouldn't say being kicked back, but we do look at, obviously, at the responses, do some analytics on it. If there is an anomaly that is sitting out there, maybe it's something where for previous years there was one response and then suddenly we see a dramatic swing. Something just raises an eyebrow, I guess, maybe on our part. I wouldn't say kick back, but we may reach back to the agency just to clarify, make sure the question was clear, us interpreting that answer and those kind of things. So yeah, there may be follow-up on a particular question or item, but wouldn't say kick back. Well, we take what you give us.
And then there was a comment about copying text from chat. Try Control C and then Control to copy and Control V to paste. I just tried that a moment ago and it worked for me. There were a couple of questions that we answered that we just typed in responses. Will the slides be available? Yes, we're going to share those by email with all attendees after the presentation. I think there was one more. There was a question about APM. Robert answered application portfolio management is what APM stands for. But I believe we have addressed all the questions.
Great.
I think
Well,
we
thank
can-
you so much for attending, y'all. Tessa's going to go over a few resources that are available to you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, so a lot of these resources that you see listed here on the slide, we have placed the links for those in the chat, and all the links on the slide are clickable as well. For the Spectrum application, we do have the Spectrum user guide, and this is a great resource for learning how to navigate through the different sections of the IRDR in the Spectrum application. For any technical issues, technical assistance that you need with Spectrum, we ask that you direct those questions and emails to the GRC mailbox. And then for questions about the IRDR process, or you need clarification on some of the questions within the IRDR, you can direct those emails to the IRDR mailbox. And again, just want to reiterate that the submission deadline is March 31st for both state agencies and institutions of higher education. So I think that concludes our presentation. We hope that you found all of the information that we provided in the Spectrum demo beneficial, and please know that we are here to support you. So if you have any questions, if you need any clarification on anything, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. John, Elizabeth, any parting words?
Just a big thank you to everyone who's working on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see the note that there must be some restricted on the cut and paste. We'll figure out how to get that information out on the webinar or website or some other way. We're certain. Yeah. So thank you all very much. Look forward to it. Again, a lot of different resources and support. If you got anything, please reach out.